Today we're speaking with Emilie, who is our Project and Client Liaison Officer for German Citizenship. The topic we're going to cover is one that will help you get started on your journey to citizenship, and that is eligibility and how to qualify for German citizenship. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and hello, Emilie. I know you've been on board for only a few weeks, but in that time, Emilie, what we worked on specifically is eligibility for German citizenship. Is that right?
That is correct, Eva.
Excellent. And that is the topic of today. So how do you, generally speaking, at a very basic level, how can you become a German citizen if you want?
There are many different ways you can become a German citizen. One of the most common and easiest pathways is if you have German ancestors, and you need to make sure that these ancestors didn't lose their citizenship. And if they did lose their citizenship, it must be either because they're a child of a mother or they are victims of Nazi persecution.
Right. And it's a very, very, very complex area of German law, particularly in light of the fact that they've just had a couple of amendments. But let's hone in on the particular citizenship type you mentioned, which is?
Determination through descent.
Okay. And how does that work?
So you need to prove that you are a descendant of a German. That can be all the way up to your great-grandparents. Usually not before 1904. That's sort of where we find the cutoff is. And you need to be able to prove lineage. So no one's lost their citizenship through military service or giving up their citizenship or naturalizing in another country. There's a lot of ways to lose German citizenship.
Right. So in other words, what the German government does, they look at you. Let's say I have German heritage somewhere. They look at my situation and see, okay, where was I born? What year was I born? Is my mother or is my father German? Or is it grandparents or great-grandparents or whatever it is? And they look at, am I able to connect or show linkage to my German ancestors? And did anything happen from the time that they left Germany and the time that I was born or further today to affect my citizenship, essentially, right? So they look at it by exclusion because the laws are so complex and everyone's situation is so different and individual.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, amazing. So the basic eligibility criteria we've already said for this particular pathway is to have a German ancestor. What other eligibility criteria are there?
You could also go through naturalization, which means usually you have to prove a very strong connection to Germany. So that could be relatives who are German. It can be that you speak German and you've lived in Germany, worked for German companies, have a lot of friends in Germany. Sort of a very strong connection that you can actually trace and prove. Having lived in Germany previously, gone to school in Germany, gone to German schools overseas. There's a lot of ways to prove your connection, but you need sort of a big collection of things to show.
Right. And of course, this is where we come in and assist people with putting all of that together. Okay. You mentioned quite a few things, but one of the things that I didn't hear is the language. So for determination, do you need to speak German?
Yes, you do. You have to have a B1 level of German judged by the European Language Services.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you'd have to study German and sit through some sort of a test, or what happens?
You can prove that you have a B1 level. There are also tests that some naturalization clients have had to do. It depends on your type of naturalization, but you will have to prove your German levels.
And what you've explained just briefly when when you were speaking, to my mind, is that there are sort of several pathways to obtain German citizenship, and the pathway that you can choose depends on lots of different factors. Could you maybe take us through a couple for determination? What sort of factors, and how would I know that I qualify for that particular pathway?
Now that the new law has passed, there is only naturalization basically through connection to Germany. We used to have two simplified versions which required lower levels of German if you were a descendant of a female. So if your father's mother was German or your mother was German, then there was a simplified path. But that's no longer available, because now if your mother is German or your grandmother was German, you are determined to be German, because the German court decided that that was gender discrimination.
Mhm.
And now you have 10 years to prove that you have German ancestors who were female.
Okay, so that's amazingly flexible, because I think it's fair to say that prior to that, and Germany is not in any way different than many other European states, you know, for example, Poland, Czech Republic, some of the laws as they applied when they were first introduced discriminated women, because through by virtue of marriage or naturalization, women lost citizenship. So this is quite progressive, and we were watching with bated breath as to what's going to happen. So it is opening more doors to more people. Is that right?
It is. Also, what I didn't mention in the naturalization process, if you've married a German, you can prove it easier, your connection to Germany. And sometimes you need a lower level of German for that. So there's special conditions for people who have married German citizens.
Okay, so in other words, some of it is a little bit discretionary and would be assessed on the basis of effort rather than outcome. It's I think they from what I'm hearing, and everything's quite new and fresh. It sounds like some of those provisions are a lot more flexible, but then they removed a couple of others that that no longer exist, and you can no longer apply under those pathways. Is that right?
Yes, but those pathways have been made easier for those people affected. So it's been a really good decision.
Because I think the German diaspora is quite large, certainly in Australia. I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that there are pockets of German immigrants or descendants of German immigrants that are still very, very connected, like in South Australia, Adelaide, and a few other places where you know, they're more German than Germans, if I can put it that way, because they still speak the language and they're quite connected. So that would be a perfect example of someone potentially who would qualify and be successful if they were to go through this. Yeah.
Definitely. The only drawback is a lot of the time you might have to give up your citizenship. We've discovered a few pathways where you can make a pretty good case for keeping your Australian citizenship or your foreign citizenship. But it is up to the government in Germany to decide whether or not you get to retain your previous citizenship.
Right. So the German government still insists that unless you have European citizenship as your second citizenship, that you need to renounce it. And there are provisions in the law where you can apply for an exemption or plead with the government if it disadvantages you significantly, or if you have connections to your place of birth that are so strong that would disadvantage you if you were to renounce it. Yeah.
Although if you fall under the Nazi persecution article of 1162, then you get to retain your foreign citizenship, because they're trying to make up for past mistakes in that. And so for that, you don't have to apply to keep your citizenship.
Okay, amazing. All right, I'm going to hand over to Stephanie now for a quick question to you, Emilie. But thank you so much for outlining the new provisions in the law and how determination works. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. We've got a question from Alice, and she asks, how long does the process take to gain citizenship through determination?
There's no way of telling how long the German government's going to take. Each case is different. We can definitely assist in speeding it up by having all the documentation ready to go and translated for the German authorities to go through easily. But usually it can be up to about 2 years or more. So it's a long wait.
It is a long wait, but what you get at the end opens a lot of doors for you. It gives you flexibility of being able to live and work and study in Europe. And I think for a lot of people that we work with, it's also an emotional connection. So naturally, people want that second passport, particularly now during the pandemic. But I think the journey of reclaiming your German citizenship also means a lot to a lot of people in terms of their identity and reconnecting with their heritage, and having these laws being made a bit more flexible will assist people with making that journey shorter, except that once it's with the German government, it's with the German government, and they don't really correspond with you or ask any more questions. So it's very important to get the application right first time, and that's where we come in, and that's where we help.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. And I think on that note, we are done. Emilie, thank you so very much for speaking to us. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. There you have it. We've got lots of useful information from Emilie, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Again, we encourage everyone to get in touch and check out our social media channels, as we post a lot of information about German citizenship. Thanks again, Eva. Thanks again, Emilie.
Thank you.